He will be starting soon. Oh, story time with Mr. Lamada, where all your dreams come true. Oh, he brings to life your favorite stories with a great big smile. You won't leave lonely, won't you start all the reading? I just can't wait to be hearing story time with Mr. Lamada. He will be starting soon. Oh, story time with Mr. Lamada, where all your dreams come true. Oh, he brings to life your favorite stories with a great big smile. You won't leave lonely, won't you start all the reading? I just can't wait to be hearing.
Good morning, and welcome to Storytime. Thank you so much for joining me. Oh yes, happy Thursday to you wherever you're joining us from today, and excited for today's story. And yes, wonderful time together ahead. Thank you so much for being here. Glad we can spend this time together and of course enjoy a beautiful story, and of course an inspiring story indeed, and one from one of probably one of the landmark happenings in the US history, and probably in the history of the world. This is a big one coming from Mildred and Richard Loving case, and today we are reading Loving versus Virginia. A powerful case indeed, and one that I hope that you stick around for. And of course, if you do have information that you want to share about it, please absolutely go ahead. But we'll be reading excerpts from this one and enjoying it together, and of course learning and looking at where we're coming from, and of course how that shapes where we're going. Thank you so much for joining in Storytime today. Loving versus Virginia. This is a young adult reader's book actually, but we're sharing it here on Storytime, and we will indeed adapt it accordingly. Thank you so much for joining in Storytime. Absolutely love it that we're here together. This one is written by PATRICIA, HRUBY, Powell, and illustrations by SHADRA, Strickland, and of course coming to you from Chronicle Books of San Francisco. Thank you so much for joining in Storytime today. Glad we're here together. Absolutely. Please let me know where you're joining in from and who is joining in with you. And of course, as I've said before, this week we have an amazing event coming up out in Sacramento, and you can see it there at the top of your screen, the Green Book. Yes, that one. It's an exhibition that will be at the California Museum in Sacramento, and we will be right there. Storytime will be there too. So please, if you can join us in person, do join us, or indeed get your tickets from the California Museum website, and indeed join us for that fun event, but of course with lots of learning, lots of lessons in there for us. Thank you so much for being here. Absolutely love it that we're here together, and of course this wonderful book coming to us, Loving versus Virginia, and we'll be reading that one very shortly. Let us see who is with us this morning, ready to enjoy a wonderful story and indeed learn together. Thank you so much for joining in Storytime. Good morning to you. How are you doing today? Rocco, Clay, and Chriselle, thank you for joining us. And it seems like it is cold out in Long Beach. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am glad you're here. Hopefully you're staying warm. Thank you for being here, and of course hugs to everybody with you out there. Thank you so much for joining in. Good morning to you one more time, Rocco, Clay, and Chriselle. Welcome to Storytime. Thank you for joining us today. Good to see you here. Good morning to you, Amanda West. How are you doing today? And of course, Sarah and Nathan. Good morning to you. And you're out in freezing and icy Illinois. Oh my goodness. Please do stay warm. Thank you so much for joining in Storytime. Absolutely appreciate the time that we spend together. I am glad you're here for more story time. Thank you for joining us. And today we do have a wonderful book indeed to read together. Thank you so much for joining in. Welcome. Absolutely love it that we're here together. One more time, Sarah and Nathan, and of course Amanda West out in Illinois. Yes, freezing and icy Illinois today. Thank you so much for joining in. Welcome to Story Time. Kennedy, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today? I am glad you're here, and you're saying greetings from Turkey. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you're having a lovely evening, and of course, I hope that you had a wonderful day too. Thank you so much for joining us today. Kennedy, Kapolyo Kampamba, thank you for being here. Absolutely love it. Good morning to you, John. How are you doing? Thank you so much for joining in. And of course, Madeline, how are you doing today as well? Thank you so much for joining in Story Time, and say good morning. Great story running out the door, but have a great day. Well, thank you. Absolutely appreciate you. Have a wonderful day too. Thank you so much for stopping in to say hello. Thank you. Appreciate you. John Castleberry, thank you. Of course, coming from the Conscious Kids fame. Thank you so much for joining us. Absolutely love it. All right. Good morning to you as well, Betty Deshay and Rikia. How are you doing today? Great to see you here. Thank you so much for joining in. Glad you're here. See you very soon. I'm glad you're here for story time, and I hope that you enjoy the wonderful book that we have together today. Thank you for being here. Hello from Canada. How are you doing, Alicia? Bruce, who's joining in with you today? Or are you alone? Well, thank you so much for being here on Storytime. Welcome to the Storytime community, and hopefully we see you many more times after this. Yes, today we read excerpts, parts of the story of Loving versus Virginia. I hope you're ready for this one. It has been a wonderful week that we've had, and of course today we have this wonderful book written by Patricia Ruby Powell and illustrations by SHADRA Strickland. And we're reading this one with permission of Chronicle Books of San Francisco. Please get comfortable, get cozy, stay warm. It looks like many places are cold out there. Stay warm and indeed enjoy this wonderful story that we have together. But please do join me on the other side of this message so we can get started with our book for today. Here we go. Join me after this short break.
I'm Meenal Patel, and I am an artist, designer, and the author and illustrator of Priya Dreams of Marigolds and Masala, and you are watching Storytime with Mr. Lamada.
Thank you, Minal. Thank you for joining us. And of course, if you want to check out Minal's books, she has written amazing books, including one of my favorites, Priya Dreams of Marigolds and Masala. You have to read that one and enjoy it. Yes, sharing different cultures out there, enjoying what different authors, different voices bring. All right, here we go with our story for today, Loving versus Virginia. And this one, we're going to be skipping around, going into the different parts of it. And just, of course, as we know, this was a landmark case that legalized interracial marriage and relations. And so up to this point, there had been so many times that people were arrested and so many things were happening. And of course, even after this case, immediately after this case, there's still states that would not allow interracial marriage. And that went on with Alabama, I think, being the last one of them to finally pass laws removing miscegenation. But we'll be reading this and enjoying it together and, of course, learning from it. All right, here we go. This one is called Loving versus Virginia. And I'll just read here for those of you that might not be familiar with the case, which I doubt there are many out there, but here we go. In 1955, in Caroline County in Virginia, amidst segregation and prejudice, injustice and cruelty, two teenagers fell in love. Their life together broke the law, but their determination would change it. Richard and Mildred Loving were at the heart of the landmark Supreme Court case that legalized marriage between the races. In spare and gorgeous verse, acclaimed author Patricia Ruby Powell tells the story of the devoted couple who faced discrimination, fought it, and won. Loving versus Virginia, coming to you from Chronicle Books of San Francisco. And there's a good poem there, too, to start us off from Langston Hughes. And it pretty much, it is a good summation of what this case was. And this one is called The Long View, Negro. Emancipation, 1865. sighted through the telescope of dreams, looms larger, so much larger, so it seems, than truth can be. But the turn of the telescope around, look through the larger end, and wonder why what was so large becomes so small again. Langston Hughes. And now we go into our story, and we're going to start off, first of all, with just their early life. And of course, this was the law. This was the Virginia law, Senate Bill 219, passed out Senate Bill 219, which to preserve racial integrity. Yeah, and we could read through that, and it mentions how non-whites could not marry whites, those that were assigned as whites. So lots and lots here to talk about. Loving versus Virginia, a documentary novel of the landmark civil rights case by PATRICIA, HRUBY, Powell, and SHADRA Strickland, and published and read with permission of Chronicle Books of San Francisco. And the dedication to all of you is for all those who struggle with injustice. Oh yes, it is an ongoing process. Keep up the fight. And here we go. Just what was happening around that time. In 1950 and 1941, classrooms for white and non-white children under the separate but equal laws. Look at those pictures. What was different? A segregationist is one who conscientiously believes that that it is in the best interest of Negro and white to have a separate education and social order. And that was the governor of Alabama, George Wallace, saying that. Start off with Mildred. Who was Mildred Loving? Central Point, Caroline County, Virginia, in the fall of 1952. Garnett and I walk in the grass alongside the road to keep our shoes clean, but Louis doesn't care. He's shuffling through dust in the midst of the road, in the middle of the road. Garnett's hand-me-down lace-ups have the most life left in them. So they are the best. She gets the best because she's the oldest, and she has the feet to fit them. I wear her wore-out sandal shoes from last year, but painted and buffed till they nearly glow. To me, they are the best. Being saddle shoes, even though I can feel every stick and pebble through the thin down soles. Louis wears boots so wore out, looks like Nippy. Chewed them soft. It looks like Nippy chewed them soft out in the barn. Being the youngest of 7 brothers, not telling who wore those boots before him. Louis is right down in the track rats, kicking up dirt and stones onto my white polished shoes till I have to say, just quit it. So he says, make me. I say, you know I can, Pipsqueak. He's just 8, and this is the truthful description of his size. I grab him around his scrawny middle. He hollers, don't touch me. Don't touch me, you stringy bean. He's laughing hard because he knows I won't really whop him because I am 5 years older and 5 years bigger. Now I am laughing hard enough, I could just about choke. But I managed to say, don't you ever call me string bean, you pipsqueak. And I yell to Garnett, who's walking ahead because she is just too old for this nonsense. Help me, Garnett. Well, maybe not too old because Garnett comes out and grabs hold of Louis' elbow and I hoist the other, and we fly Louis over that dirt road with him pedaling midair and hollering, and that's how we arrive at Sycamore School. We are all in Miss Green's class. Louis is the bottom in 1st grade, so Miss Green directs him to the front row. Garnett's at the top in 7th, so she's in the back row. I am across the aisle being in 6th, all in one room, one teacher for everyone. Miss Green hands each of us older kids a sheet of paper and pencils and says, put your name in the top right corner and write what you did during summer vacation. Didn't she keep last year's report? I write Mildred Cheddar and my paper tears. I lift it and see that my desk is a very sad excuse for a desk. Carved into the wooden top are initials JJ, which most likely was dug out by my much older half-brother, James Cheddar, and I bet he got a thrashing for it. And there's PF and EJ, and even a heart with RG and AM, and I try to figure out which of my brothers, cousins, or neighbors belong to those initials. But Miss Green says, Mildred, is there a problem? No, ma'am, I say. I lay my paper back down and no sooner set my pencil to it when it tears again. I lift my desktop to see if there's more paper inside, and there isn't. Inside me, something hard and tight makes me slam that desk shut. Mildred, growls Miss Green. Miss Green, ma'am, I say, in my most polite voice. This is a mess of a desk. It is all carved up. Miss Green comes over and hands me a reading book with a broken spine and says, put your textbook under your paper and try it again. I take the book, open it up to see Edward Cheddar, another half-brother, written sloppy, and then crossed out, and George Cheddar, also written sloppy, crossed out, and plenty of other names crossed out. You would think it would give me comfort knowing that big older brothers read these very pages, these very stories. But what I see in all those many names crossed out, I know my lower lip is jutting way forward the way it does when I am peeved. My eyes sting, so I suck my lip into my mouth to keep from crying. My desk is rotten. I want a brand new reader that smells like ink and glue rather than this one that reeks of grime and mildew. Oh, and has been in the germy hands of many boys. At that moment, Garnett leans across the aisle and touches my wrist. I don't care. I don't dare look at her. Oh, surely I will cry. She hands me her paper. I set it on the old reader and focus on it hard so I won't cry. Still, one tear plops onto the paper. Aww. And we're going to skip ahead from here, just a little glimpse into what Mildred's early life was. Then now we're going to skip ahead and go on and read a little bit about Richard. Who was Richard and how did they meet? And then we're going to hop on along a lot further. All right, here we go. So here's the story of Richard. Saturday morning, I was under the hood screwing the carburetor of my 41 DeSoto. Ray drove up, looked over my shoulder, said, your car had been loading up on fuel. I would adjust that one to the lean side. Yeah, I said, that's what I did. He said, it's the weekend, let's go. So we drove in Ray's car over to the Jadders to see Dookie and Batten and the rest. They were sure to have good food. We ate and played some ball. I caught a kickball that went flying behind the apple trees, and their little sister went bananas. Seeing the catch of fire was almost worth the ball Dookie fired at me. I didn't mean anything by it, just having a little fun. I apologized to the kid, though. Then on Monday, me and Ray driving the hardtop toward home. Here comes the flashing red light, the wheezing of that siren. Yep, Sheriff R.G. Brooks. Ray stopped, of course. Sheriff is the law. Let me see your license, boy. Called him boy. Sheriff calls Ray's father boy. I saw Ray roll his eyes, but Sheriff didn't see. Ray's license, it says colored. Sheriff hates coloreds. Leaned in the car and saw me and said, "What are you doing here, son?" "No, boy, I am son. Thank God, not his." "I am coming home from work, sir," I said, slow and careful so he don't misunderstand any part of what I said. What sheriff means is, why is a white boy in this car with a colored? We never went to school together, Ray and me, before he had dropped out. Ray went to Union for coloreds. I went to Caroline for whites before I dropped. I hate the sheriff, but I make him think that ain't the case. No use having the law on your tail. I said, "I was walking down the road, sir, and my friend here, he offered me a ride." Sheriff nodded and looked at us, sneered like a toad, stared up into the air. I looked over at Ray. He was seething, but got it all under control inside him. Sometimes looking cool. Me too, I can look cool. Me, I am white, but my buddy, he drives a truck for PE Boyd. But my dad drives a truck for PE Boyd. Maybe the richest, roundest, jolliest colored farmer in the section. In other parts, a white man working for a colored man, that was unusual. That would be unusual. But that's how it was here in Central Point. Sheriff, don't look like this lousy bit. He was upset and thinking of a white man working for a black man. Worse than being colored, right, Sheriff? I didn't say out this loud, but I was thinking it, just thinking. And that's a little glimpse into how life was at that point. And remember, too, that many landmark cases are happening at that point, too. And then this time, we also had the Brown versus Board of Education in May of 1954. And this is what it was roughly about. In 1951, 13 parents filed against the Topeka, Kansas Board of Education, protesting the policy of racial segregation. The Kansas District Court ruled against the plaintiffs. The parents appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. In 1954, the Supreme Court gave its verdict, banning racial segregation in schools. We conclude that in the field of public education, the doctrine of separate but equal has no place. Separate education facilities are inherently unequal. And this was the Supreme Court's ruling. Even so, it would be more than 15 years of struggle and protest before the last American school desegregated. So much happening. But now we're talking about, the Loving case. And so we're going to jump further ahead after they've met and decide to get married. And we're going to see what happens at that time, because there's so much that happens. And yes, you see for yourself in these laws that after they got married, they were actually exiled from their own state. But here we go. Freedom of the individual versus the right of the state. Bernie Cohen and Phil Hickinson spent hours in law libraries researching and composing their appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. Remember that the Virginia Supreme Court and the lower courts had dismissed or ruled in favor of the state of Virginia to uphold miscegenation. So here we go. Bernie Cohen and Phil Hishop spent hours in law libraries researching and composing their appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. The two young lawyers were further advised by the National Civil Liberties Union. More experienced lawyers were added to their team, including Mel Wolfe and David Carliner, then William Zabel and Arthur Burney and Marvin Kapatkin. The team of lawyers' number one question addressed whether the Virginia courts had provided the Lovings the equal protection as it promised in the 14th Amendment. The second question addressed whether the Lovings were denied due process of the law, whether the state could interfere with an individual's choice of mate. This was the case of freedom of the individual versus the right of the state, a huge case for such young lawyers. Phil Hiscock, only 2 years out of law school, was not yet eligible to request that a case be heard in the U.S. Supreme Court. Bernie Cohen, 3 years out of law school, was barely eligible to request the case, which he did. Hiscock and Cohen filed their notice of appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court on May 31, 1966. On December 12 of that year, the U.S. Supreme Court accepted the case. This in itself was a big step, as the Supreme Court takes only out of the several hundred cases put before it. The hearing was set for April 10th, 1967. Oh my goodness, so much happening, so much happening. That is the case there. And then let's go to the final where the ruling was done. And I hope that you can find this book at your local library, or indeed where you find books, and get to read it from cover to cover and just see what happened in full detail. On June 12, 1967, Chief Justice Warren returned to the podium and proclaimed simply, "Judgment is reversed." You know, all the cases that they've gone through. And at this point, it was reversed. We won! Mr. Cohen and Mr. Hiscock on the phone. They asked to come to the press conference at their office in Alexandria, right here in Virginia. We don't have to pretend we live in Washington. We can go together to their Virginia office. I put my hand over the phone and asked Richard about driving to Alexandria. He frowns and says, "No, it's time they leave us alone." I say to Mr. Cohen, "Thank you for everything, but I don't think so." He says, "Mrs. Loving, this is important. I think it would be good for Americans to hear you speak." I cover the phone again and say, "Richard, Mr. Cohen thinks it is important we can take the kids to the Garnets." He nods. "Okay, Mr. Cohen, we'll be there as soon as we can. But it is still hours away." Oh. I drove fast, maybe so I could get it all over and done with, so we could leave peacefully. The sooner the better. Millie was excited that that made me happy. At the press conference, I said, "We're just really overjoyed. I didn't really expect to win. This has been going on for 9 long years. When they asked if I had been ready to give up, I said, I would do it again. If we lost, I would find another suit in another 5 years. This is what I want." They asked, "Who do you think your grandchildren should marry?" I think I'll leave that to them. Let them decide for themselves. Plans? Yes. My wife and I plan to go ahead and build a new home now, next to her parents' house. How does it feel? Well, it's hard to believe. For the first time, I can put my arm around her and publicly call her my wife. And that's what I will do. At the press conference, I say, I feel free now. It was a great burden. Yes, I thought the court would rule in our favor. No, our neighbors have not been hostile. No, we do not bear a grudge against the state of Virginia. Yes, the children are 6, 7, and 8. No, they are not aware of the case. It's best to leave them out of it. Somewhere in there, I start crying, but not angry tears. Tears stream down my cheeks because so much has happened. 9 years worth of tears slide down my face. Mr. Cohen says to the newsman, "We hope we have put the rest of the vestiges of racial discrimination in Virginia and all over the country." When the cameras are gone, I begin thanking Mr. Cohen, and to my surprise, and maybe to his too, I lift my arms and hug him. The same with Mr. Hiscock. I am filled with joy. Richard and I can go home now, and our family can leave in peace. And we will end there for now. Thank you so much for joining in Storytime. There is so much to read in this book, and just to learn from and enjoy, and also to see where we are coming from. And I think one of the important things too that Mildred says in there is, like, when she's asked, what about your grandchildren? Who do you think they should marry? And she says, I will leave it up to them. We'll leave it up to them. It's best they choose who they want, who their mate should be. And I think that's how it should be. Thank you so much for joining in Storytime today. And remember, these were teenagers. They were teenagers when they got married, and they were young people, you know, like going through this whole hard life where they had to pretend they were not married, or, you know, like just live in neighborhoods not knowing what people were thinking. And just it's so hard to think of young people in love and going through what Mildred and Richard did. And thank you to them, their persistence, and everybody that aid as well, that supported them, the lawyers, the ACLU, everybody that came in to support, because it is so important. It is that important. And I am thankful today that, you know, we can have mixed couples, we can have mixed families without a worry. And thank you to cases like this one. And of course, there were many cases too that had come up before this. Like we know there was Kirby versus Kirby and many others that came up that had not been successful. But to have the Lovings be a success story, which is a success story for all of us. Thank you so much for joining in Storytime. Glad you were here together. And remember, Storytime, we're here to learn from each other, to teach each other, and of course, to reflect on where we're coming from, reflect on our history, and reflect on where we're going right now. Thank you so much for being here. Please do share your thoughts. Feel free to share your thoughts. And of course, leave us a message and we'll be sure to get back to you and indeed get to conversate with you as well, and just talk about these issues, right? We're all learning together, and indeed we're grappling with so many issues right now. So thank you for being here. To all you little ones joining out there, I hope this was a wonderful lesson for you too, knowing where we're coming from, and I hope that it encourages you to dig a little deeper into everything else that is happening around us in our communities. Thank you so much for joining in Storytime, and a big thank you indeed to Chronicle Books for allowing us to share this wonderful book here on Storytime. And indeed, a big thank you to PATRICIA, HRUBY, Powell for the research, and of course, SHADRA Strickland for helping make this book come alive and indeed help with the illustrations. Thank you so much for joining us on Storytime. This has been Loving versus Virginia. Yes, excerpts of this wonderful book indeed. Please do join me again tomorrow when we bring up another young person who will be up against it and up fighting and indeed up to victory. And tomorrow we'll be reading Alexandria Fights Back. Join in for this one. It is an exciting book. It is a multilingual book. It is also in Spanish. So please do join us. And I hope that you enjoy the reading with us tomorrow. A wonderful book awaits. But thank you so much for joining us today. Let us see who was with us and joined in. Thank you, Alicia. I am so proud that you're able to join us today. Thank you so much for joining in. And you say, wonderful, sad that I have the same last name as the sheriff, but happy that my oldest son is a descendant of the Lafayettes, whom were the first African-American family to come to Canada through the Underground Railroad. Whew. Lots and lots in there. Thank you so much for sharing, Alicia Bruce. I absolutely appreciate it. And yes, hopefully you can find this book at your local library and indeed elsewhere that you find books, and read more into it, read more about it. It is just such a powerful book. Thank you for sharing that message. And indeed, I hope that, your life is a good one as well. You and, your son and everybody else in your family, in your life. Thank you for joining in Storytime. This has been Storytime for today. Absolutely love it. Alicia, thank you for joining us on Storytime. And I hope that we see you again here many, many times. Thank you for being here. And this wonderful book that we just read. Yes, excerpts of the wonderful book that we read. Alicia, thank you so much, and sending you hugs. And of course, a powerful story too there. I would love to hear more about coming through the Underground Railroad. I know that this month we've been looking at a lot of topics, including the Underground Railroad, with my students and also close friends. And so I'd definitely love to hear more about that. And it's just such an amazing story that you share right there. Thank you so much for joining in Storytime. To everybody that was here with us today, this has been Storytime. Please do join me again tomorrow for when we're reading Alejandria Fights Back. This one, a powerful one indeed. Please do join me for this one tomorrow at 7 and of course 11 a.m. Pacific time. Thank you for being here for Storytime. Absolutely appreciate each and every one of you. And please do not forget too that we do have the special event that is happening out in Sacramento on Saturday. Please do join in. Storytime will be there live in person. But of course, you can also join us. You can also join in online. So please, if you can join us online, do join in. But also you can join in person. Please do get your tickets right now. They're going on the California Museum of Sacramento website. So please do join in. And of course, find the details on the Storytime platforms. And it'll be a fun event. It promises to be a fun event. I am excited for it. So please do look out for this one. The Green Book, Navigating to Freedom, on Saturday, February 26th, 2022. Please do join in for that one. It is happening this Saturday. Thank you for joining in Storytime. I will see you again tomorrow when we are back for Alexandria Fights Back, another young person fighting injustice and fighting against some big people, but they stand their ground. Definitely stand their ground and making sure that the justice is upheld. So do join in and find out how that story unfolds. Thank you so much for being here. Much love to all of you. Hugs, and I hope that you have a wonderful day indeed. Thank you so much for joining in Storytime. Bye-bye.
Some people that look like me, others very different from the way that I look and think. Read me all of your stories. Read me all of your stories. Story time with Mr. Lamada, where all your dreams come true. He brings to life your favorite stories with a great big smile. You won't live lonely, won't you start all the reading? We just can't wait to hear it. Brings to life your favorite stories with a great big smile. You won't live lonely, won't you start all the reading? We just can't wait to hear it.